Oh, by the way, chat, an actual, like, super poggers part. I can't believe that this is the case. I actually didn't get screwed over. My bill for mole removal and lab test to make sure it wasn't cancer, it only ended up being $40, which is like, I thought it was going to be so much. I only got charged $40. It was, the full price was technically $230, but then they had a, like, my insurance didn't pay any of it, but they had a negotiation price with the place I went, so it knocked it down from $230 to $40, and I was like, all right, I will gladly take that. Did I ever get billed for the one vaccination? I did not. They never billed me for it. However, I looked up the legal thing about it in this specific state. There is no legal obligation for me to do anything, and if I don't get the bill within 12 months, then I legally am not obligated to pay. So I'm just letting that one slide, because I literally looked up the law on it. I'm just hoping I don't ever get it. All right, like, I'm okay if they don't bill me for it. I'm totally okay. If they don't send me the bill for that, I am totally fine with that. If they do, though, I mean, it's whatever. It's a vaccination, so it's not that much, but still. It could also be theoretically that maybe the insurance just covered it, and that's why I never got the bill for it. Maybe they just flat out cover vaccinations. I have no idea. That could also be it. Oh, speaking of, I completely forgot about my second and third dose of the hepatitis vaccine. I actually booked one in for Friday. I am like way late on it. You're supposed to do first dose, second dose a month later, third dose 6 months later. I'm not doing second dose 5 months later, but I looked it up online and they said that if you forgot, just return to the normal vaccination schedule like it wasn't a break. So, oops. All they said online is what happens is that you might not get the full 20-year protection, but I was like, all right. No, this one specifically is not a restart. If you had a break longer in between dose 1 and 2, they literally says continue on dose 2 and do dose 3 recommended. It's not restarting it. Oh, it's just a hepatitis A and B vaccine. We don't really have that in Sweden. My husband and I are going to TwitchCon. I hope to see you there. Yeah, like I said, I'll probably be there. I've talked to Maisie about it. I probably should buy my ticket soon. I kind of forgot about it. The only thing that scares me is wondering how much, because usually when it comes to TwitchCon, as someone who's gone to TwitchCon before, the issue with TwitchCon is never the tickets to get into the event, it's the hotel prices. The only options if you want to go there cheap is to either have an hotel really far away or get an Airbnb really far away. If you actually want to be close to the event in a hotel, then you're paying a good amount. You're paying a little premium. Do you know what is a really bad thing that I've recently gotten a feeling for doing, Chad? Can I tell you a really stupid thing? I kind of want to get a motorcycle license. Not because I want to drive a motorcycle, but I want to, what is it called in English? Like a tricycle? I saw a super sick tricycle recently, and I was like, that's so cool. So I kind of want to get a motorcycle license so I could legally drive a tricycle. They look so cool, man. It's so cool. Trike, is that what it's called? The motorcycle with 3 wheels, basically. I saw one guy that had customized one of them. No, because a tricycle would not be the one with the motor. Anyways. But yeah, I saw one guy that had customized it so that it looked like a Batmobile, like from Batman. And I was like, that's so cool. Yeah, it's like a 3-wheel motorcycle basically, and you can have like even 2 seats on it. It looks super cool. Can't you drive them with a car license? No, not in the state of Texas. Those are extremely uncommon in the US. Yeah, they are, but you see them every now and then here where I live, and I think they're really cool, and they're surprisingly affordable. They're really cool. Yeah, because here's the thing. I really love driving out in the open. So in Sweden, I would love to go driving on my moped. I didn't buy a motorcycle. I just had like a slower moped. And I loved driving that thing. Loved it. One of my favorite things ever to drive. However, I never want to drive a moped or a motorcycle in the US because it's just like, well, if you're American, I think you can understand without me going in more detail. If you've seen the drivers, you understand. But I still love the idea of being outside, and even though it's still sort of not super safe, it's like safer at least, as long as I'm careful with my turns, because the only thing that's a little bit worse about those are the center of gravity. But at least I'm like, I can sort of experience it the same way then without like being as exposed. This one is actually pretty damn good. I would love to go YOLO, but it would be a really bad decision, so I don't think I am. Okay, dude. Fine, I'm gonna go YOLO. I just lost so much time to that text. I don't know if I was facing the camera in the correct way for this setup, so my setup might be wrong. A little bit scared. Yeah. I'll try one more time. If I get a YOLO, my run's still alive, but now I have to YOLO it. Because perfect second try YOLO roughly ties non-YOLO. Okay, this time I made sure to actually look the correct way. I got it, but the island loaded too much. That's unfortunate. Shouldn't have done the YOLO. How have the runs been so far? Well, I've only done one run. It went pretty well, so I guess pretty good so far. Did you guys see the honestly strange thing that Nintendo did? I'm kind of shocked that they even did this. I expected them to do nothing. So, Nintendo just shut down all of the Wii U game servers. But then they actually announced that they were opening up 2 servers again. So they turned off all the servers for like all the online games. But they actually announced that they're reopening it for Mario Kart 8 and Splatoon 1. Somehow. I'm shocked. So they basically closed all the servers and then went, no, we'll reopen them for Mario Kart 8 and Splatoon 1. So I guess if you like Splatoon 1 or Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, the servers are actually up back now. So, yeah. You think Wind Waker is better than Tears of the Kingdom? If you were to do a casual playthrough, I don't think so. It hurts me to say, but I don't think so. I think you will get more hours of entertainment out of a open world game like Tears of the Kingdom than Wind Waker. Like, I think, in my opinion, with how I play Zelda games, and I think a lot of people, and I think a lot of people can probably give me a backup on this in looking at their hours. I think most people can get at least 100 hours into a game like Tears of the Kingdom casually and still enjoy it. I think if you don't like open world games at all, if you just do not like open world games and you like traditional Zelda games, then I would personally think this is the best traditional Zelda game, in my opinion. I know some people prefer Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess. I think all of them are great, don't get me wrong, but if you just talk about any Zelda game broadly, I would have a hard time to say it, but if I had to pick one, I'd say Tears of the Kingdom just because I get more hours in that. But if you want to talk about traditional games, then, I mean, you can't even compare them. To be fair, Wind Waker is the most open world out of the traditional Zelda titles. Well, I don't know if I would agree with that. I would say Skyward Sword is equally as open world as Wind Waker. It's just worse done. It's just more boring because it's more boring to fly in the sky than it is to go on a boat. But I would say both Skyward Sword and Wind Waker has both open world, just limitation to hardware. So one had to have a pretty empty ocean to deal with the limitations, and one had to have a pretty empty sky. I just rather take a more empty ocean than an empty sky. Have you got any unhinged rants about how Skyward Sword is terrible? No, I'm not going to go in full detail about Skyward Sword. Here's the thing about Skyward Sword. To be honest with you, it's going to shock some people. I don't actually think that Skyward Sword is a terrible game. I mostly, like, there are complaints about it. I legitimately, if you say Skyward Sword is a terrible game, I actually think you're wrong. As someone who doesn't like Skyward Sword that much, I don't think it's a terrible game. I think the reason why I often get in debates with people about Skyward Sword is because some people want to make the statement that Skyward Sword is so good or is the best or one of the best. And that's where I run into my issues. It's one of the more flawed 3D Zelda games out there. I feel like it's such a divided game, but it's also like it's very fair why it's very divided. But I think like my only issue about when people say it's the best one is because it's like you have to look past so many of its flaws to be able to consider it one of the best or the best, in my opinion. I think you're just like literally living in Copium world. But I have no problem saying that it's not a bad game. Like, the only way, in my opinion, that you can look at a game like Skyward Sword and say that it's the best game or one of the best games is if literally you have goggles on and you are only looking at the story aspect and you are looking past all the other things. Because if you look at the entire game as a whole, then that game is more divided for a reason. It's not just because of the motion controls. I think the reason people bring up the motion controls is because it's an easy thing to bring up without getting in a long conversation about it. But yeah, I just think Skyward Sword is a pretty good game. It's okay. That's my opinion about a Skyward Sword. It's okay. Like, to make a very long conversation decently short, the good things about Skyward Sword is it has good music, it has pretty good story, it also has some of the better dungeons. I actually think so. If you actually really look at the dungeon design and some of the items in the dungeons, it actually has pretty good, not all of them obviously, but there is a lot of pretty good dungeons in that game and a lot of cool puzzles and items for it. So those are definitely like the good aspects. And I think if you play through the whole game, you can agree with me on those aspects. When it comes to like the negatives though, the game has a lot of, in my opinion, flaws. Like, it has a lot of slow parts, it has a lot of repetition, it has a lot of really boring sections, it has a lot of boring quests and fetches. The controls, I'm not even getting into because I think that's honestly is down to personal preference, even though I'm not a huge fan of motion controls. That's just personal preference. I'm not even gonna get into that whole thing. Yeah, I just think, like, there's just a lot of, like, it just has, like, a lot of really low lows and then a lot of high ups. While most Zelda games, when you talk about them being the best, has either mids or highs. Does that make sense? Skyward Sword has lows and highs, not a lot of mids. Some of the, in my opinion, best Zelda games, when you look at them, has just medium or highs. Yeah, not everything is 10 out of 10, but there's not a lot of lows. But Skyward Sword is just like up and down, up and down, up and down so much that, in my opinion, you can't rank it the best or one of the best because you have to literally disregard the lows. Like, I'll give you an easy example of what I mean by that. What I mean by the difference in between a lot of highs and lows. So let's look at a game like Ocarina of Time, okay? And let's take into consideration the year that it came out, okay? Because obviously there are things that are outdated now. If you just were to look, chat, when you ask people who take into consideration the year that Ocarina of Time came out in, what is the one complaint that people who don't like about it always say? What is the number one thing that when you talk about people who like the game but they have the one criticism, what is the one criticism people have about Ocarina of Time? Okay, literally, chat, you're talking about graphics and you're talking about controls. I literally said disregard the year they came out. I'm talking about when the game came out. You're just talking about things that are just because it's aged. Anyways, if you actually ask people and you don't take into consideration, like I said, some of the flaws naturally from being an old game, the most common things that people say are literally just mostly water temple or a small nitpick about something like Navi. That's basically the major things that people say. And I know there's some people in chat who's like, I didn't have a problem with Water Temple. I'm not saying specifically that was your issue. I'm saying when you look at abroad about people's complaint about that game, they're very minimal and it's usually one or two of the same things. When you talk to someone about Skyward Sword, you do not get one answer. You get motion controls, you get demise, you get backtrack, you get water section, you get item, you get whip, you get the sky. There's like a bazillion small things that people bring up that people have a problem with because there's so many ups and downs. While if you look at a game, for example, like Ocarina of Time, it's, like I said, mids and mostly highs. There's not that many lows. If you look at Wind Waker and you don't look if you look past it, some people don't like the graphics. Most people only have one complaint about Wind Waker. The main one is basically, I didn't like the Triforce collecting. Obviously there's individuals who have other issues. I'm not saying there aren't any other complaints. I'm just saying there is usually a few single-handed issues that people have with the game. Skyward Sword has a lot. Yeah, 100%. If you look at Twilight Princess and you ask what's your biggest issue with Twilight Princess, most people literally complain about the tears. Or, which I think is another valid one, early game. The two biggest issues, in my opinion, in Twilight Princess is early game and tears. I actually think early game is worse than tears. Early game is deadass one of the slowest in Twilight Princess. I love Twilight Princess, one of my favorite Zelda games, but if you go back to replay that game, man, does early game just suck ass. Like, I am okay with the tears because now when I okay, this is gonna sound really papega. I didn't realize as a kid that you could see where the tears were on the map. That made the tiers 10 times better when I replayed it as an adult. I didn't realize that the map showed where the tiers were. So I was blindly going around looking at them. When I realized as an adult, wait, the map shows you where all the tier locations are, I really didn't mind the tiers as much. My biggest issue with TP is literally just early game. It is so dreadfully slow and boring. I also didn't like the water temple, but at the same time, I can't hold that against Twilight Princess because I just hate water mechanics in general for any video game at all. So that's not really like TP specific, that's just me hating water. Which is ironic because I play Wind Waker, which is based upon in the ocean, but somehow Wind Waker doesn't really have a water temple. It has like 3 rooms with water mechanics in Tower of the Gods, and that's it. Somehow the game that is based in the ocean has the least amount of water bullshit puzzles in the franchise, which I think is hilarious.